Hey guys, what's up? So in this tutorial, what we're going to be doing is showing you how to get up and running with a basic ASP.NET website, as well as using React and Babel and Webpack, which is really the three tools that you're going to use a lot whenever you're going to be writing React code. You're going to need Babel to compile your JavaScript, and you're also going to need Webpack in order to be able to handle your modules. And we'll get into that more as we go into this, but this is just going to be pretty much a one video demonstration of how you would want to or really just give a suggestion of how you could set up your project to use both ASP.NET and React. And with ASP.NET, we're obviously going to be using C Sharp, which is Microsoft's flagship language. It's their most popular language by far, and really one of the top 5 languages out right now, probably. So in order to be able to follow along on this, you're going to need to have something to write your code in. And since we're using ASP.NET, you're probably going to want to use Visual Studio. And there's a free version, so you can download that here at this webpage. You can also get .NET Core. We're going to be using actually .NET 4.5, so not .NET Core, but it will come with your install. So just go ahead and make sure you have Visual Studio installed. The next thing you're going to need is you're going to need to have Node.js installed, because that's how we're going to install our tools like Babel and Webpack and React. So make sure both of these are installed on your machine. I'm going to be using Windows, but you can probably follow along just fine on a Mac or a Linux machine too. So once you have Visual Studio installed, and I went ahead and opened it here, you're going to be greeted with this start page. And what we're going to do is just go to File, New, and create a new project. And then inside here, what I'm going to do is you can highlight web if you want, so you have less options to deal with. And we're not going to be using Core again, we're going to be using .NET 4.5, so that's why I'm selecting this version here. You're going to want to go ahead and create a place to put it here. I'm not going to use a Git repository. That's just beyond the scope of this this tutorial here. I like to put my projects in a folder on my C drive, just so I have a same place to reference them. I put them right in here. So I have a C# folder already here, so I'm going to go ahead and just select that folder. And here, this is the name of the project that you're going to be titling. So in my case, it's going to be React demo, I guess. I'll just call it React demo. All right, we'll click OK. And now here, what we want to do is select MVC, but we're going to do, actually, we're going to do empty. We don't want to have any of the boilerplate or any of the stuff that it comes with. So we're just going to do an empty website. I'm not going to add unit tests. That's, once again, probably beyond the scope of what I'm trying to demonstrate here. So let's just select the empty and click OK. All right, so here it went ahead and set up the project for us. There's not much here. The right-hand side here, the Solution Explorer, is where your actual the contents of your project are located. There's going to be a lot of Microsoft-specific stuff in here that might be confusing if you've never gotten started with ASP.NET before, like the web config and just, well, that's probably because it's empty that there's not going to be too much confusing stuff. But had we have selected the regular ASP.NET website, you're going to have authentication and everything all built in and working for you, and that can be sometimes difficult to figure out what's going on there. But let's go ahead and create our controller, because what we want to do is when the application starts, we want to have just go ahead and have like an initial greeting page. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on the project, and I'm going to say add, and we're going to say new scaffolded item, and we want to grab an MVC controller, and we're just going to say that it's empty. And we'll call it the default controller, that's fine. All right, so that went ahead and added quite a bit of stuff that our project needs, because now that it knows that you added a controller, it's like, oh, well, we need to go ahead and add all this other stuff, like this route config. We'll get into that in just a second, but this is actually how your application is able to hit the controllers that you add to the project. This just explains how the routing is supposed to work, because you can customize that quite a bit. But we're not going to get into too much of this basic stuff, and really it's not basic at all. It's what every project in ASP.NET needs. So at least for MVC.NET, and we don't need to dissect all those pieces here. We just want to go ahead and get moving on. Because this is mostly about how to integrate React with your ASP.NET project. All right, so let's go ahead and in the controllers folder, there's now this default controller. and you can see that it's returning this view. So we have just one index, and in order to return something, because right now we're going to return essentially nothing, because there is no view in the default folder down here in the views. So we want to go ahead and create that, and there's a shortcut to be able to do that. If you have this controller file, go ahead and hover over view and right click, and then just say add view. And then here, this is we're going to go with the default. We want to have the index match the method name, which is index. So make sure that those because it has to match up. Otherwise, it's not going to be able to find the right template. And we also want to have this use a layout page selected. So we're going to go ahead and select the layout page that it's supposed to use, and that's going to be right here. And the reason why we use layout pages is just for code reuse. So that way, if there's a lot of stuff that all the pages share, you can have that sitting in the layout and just have the pages that derive from that, not use everything, or not have to duplicate all that stuff that's in the layout, because it uses the layout plus the additional code. I'll explain that more in detail. But go ahead and click add. So this is going to add our view, and you can see now under the default folder where it used to be empty, there's now an index file. And this is going to be, we'll just change this to React tutorial. All right, and inside here, this is actually called Razor syntax. So if you've, in fact, if you've never used ASP.NET, you probably want to follow along on a different tutorial before you even get to this, because this is mostly, once again, about how to integrate React with ASP.NET. All right, what I want to do though is customize this layout folder, or the layout file. So inside shared, the layout, we're going to go ahead and take out some of the stuff that I don't want in the project right now. Taking out those two lines. Down here, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this stuff here. We do want this render section down here, so I do want to keep that. And I also want to copy this line, and I'm going to put it at the top of the head here, or actually at the bottom of the head. And inside, we're going to change the name of it. And the reason why is because we want to have two sections that we're going to use. We have the footer section and the head section. And that's all we're doing here. We can go ahead and change our application name. So we'll say React tutorial. I wish I could spell tonight. All right, and let's go ahead and just click play. But before we do that, let's see here. Yeah, let's go ahead and click play. This thing's definitely kind of slow. All right, so when it finally actually opens up, we don't have this this root file pointing to our default template. But if we went ahead and we did / and just did default for the name of our controller that we created, now you're actually going to hit the tutorial that we changed. And because we took out all the CSS and everything, like there's no good styling here. So let's go ahead and fix that real quick. And just so that we know what's going on inside the layout. I'm going to go ahead and go to the content folder, and we want to drag in Bootstrap. And then under that, we also want to drag in the site CSS. Now this was actually happening under the covers, but I wanted to explain really just, I didn't want any sort of that magic going on. I just wanted to be very explicit about what files and everything are being loaded. Because we're using Bootstrap, we also need to actually use both jQuery and Bootstrap, because Bootstrap requires jQuery. So let's go ahead and bring that in first. And all you have to do is just click and hold, and it'll actually map it for you and everything. And then we're going to drag in Bootstrap here. All right, so we should be able to just close it down. So let's just go ahead and stop it and rerun it, so that way I can open it in the browser. And you can see that we have much better styling this time, and it's even responsive, so that you have the responsive navigation, which there's no items there. But anyway, that is working. So if we want to fix that issue where it's opening up the first page and it's not actually finding it, then what we need to do is go into our route config, which is in the app start folder. And if we double click on that, Inside this instantiation code right here, what we want to do is add another argument, which is controller, and then we're going to give it the name of the controller that we want it to default to, which is our default controller. And then now when we go ahead and start it, it's actually going to find that default controller. So we don't have to put that in the URL. We can just, it'll find it for us and go right there from the root directory. There, boom. All right, so now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and go into our project folder structure here. And what I want to do inside the scripts, this is actually where I'm going to put our React project. I'm going to create a folder inside of here, and we're just going to call it our React folder. And let's go ahead and navigate to where that's located. All right, so here's the React demo folder. So if I go, you can see I'm just inside my projects folder where I put this project. So if I go inside of the scripts, not the scripts, yeah, scripts, sorry, scripts folder, and then we're gonna go inside the React folder. In this address bar, type in CMD, and it's gonna be a shortcut to open up your command prompt to that folder. Now, what I want you to do is if you installed Node, like I told you at the beginning of the video, then when you type in npm, it should actually pull up information. Npm is a package manager, and it allows us to install things like React and stuff like that. It's going to reach across the web and grab the latest React code, and it handles like dependencies that certain projects need. So that's why we needed to install Node, because we needed the npm tool. So if you get information like this, that means that you've installed npm in Node correctly, so you can continue. If not, you need to go ahead and reinstall that so that you can get that working. And the first thing we need to do inside this folder now is we're going to create an initialization file, so an init file. So let's go ahead and do that now. We're going to say npm init. I'll make this a little bigger so you guys can see. All right, so down here, let me try to shrink this a bit. All right, there you go. And so we're going to type npm init, which is short for initialization. We don't want to call it React, actually. We'll just call it tutorial. So that's the name of the project that npm is going to reference. And we'll just say version 1.0, that's okay. We'll say Chris Hawks React and ASP.NET tutorial. Now here's the starting point. We're going to call it our starting point app.js. And don't worry about the test command or the git repository or keywords. And I'll put my name in there. You can put your own name. And then we'll do MIT license. And that's good. All right, so now that we've done that, it created this package.json folder. Now, in order to write React code, you're going to need to get a better editor than Visual Studio. So unfortunately, the support in Visual Studio, at least with 2015, it certainly didn't work. Let's go ahead and try with Visual Studio first and see how ugly it is. But inside this, our project folder, inside the React, you can see that there's nothing. It looks like there's nothing inside the React folder, even though we can see that we just created a file called package.json in there, but it's not showing up in Visual Studio. The reason why is you need to click this little button at the top that says Show All Files. And then you can see that it's showing you that, hey, this package.json file is in the project. But because it's grayed out like that, it's not included in the project. So in order to do that, we want to right-click and include in the project. And the reason why certain files are included and not included is you'll see in just a second when we go and install Node that we don't necessarily want everything in all of these folders to be added to our project, and having Visual Studio have to keep track of the files and things like that. And I'll explain that more in just a second here. You'll see why. But inside this package.json file, this is going to be responsible for keeping track of all your dependencies. So when we install React, React has dependencies on all kinds of other different projects that it's going to install for us. And that's why npm just makes that so much easier to get things like React working. And so we'll see in just a second here that this file here is going to grow as we install stuff. So the first thing is, let's go ahead and install React, and we're going to say npm install -- and we're going to say save. And then I want to say React and then space React DOM. All right, so once again, this is reaching across the web. It's going and it's installing all the different dependencies and everything. Because we did save, it's actually going to add those two things that we installed to our dependencies location of this config file. And that's why I was telling you that it keeps track of the versions that you have, because if you have React 16.2, you can't have React DOM 16.5 or 14 point something or another. You're going to have all kinds of problems, but npm is actually, it's following the dependency structure pretty well, so it handles all that for us. Now, what I want to show you, because I was telling you about the reason why you don't want to have all these files included in Visual Studio, there's now this node modules folder which all these different things got installed into, and the reason why was because we installed React, but React has all these dependencies, so all this stuff has to actually be downloaded as well in order for React to be able to work in React DOM. So even though we didn't say to install all these things, they did anyway because they need to be there in order for React to work. And if we go back to Visual Studio and we refresh, you can see the node modules folder, but I'm not going to right click and include that one because there's just too much stuff in there I don't want Visual Studio keeping track of. Visual Studio is a memory pig, so the thing can run out of memory at any random time and just like crash. It happens all the time. Ask any Windows developer. All right, so now that we've done that, we need to go ahead and install a few other things, and these are our development tools. So instead of actually saying that they're a dependency, they're actually a development dependency as we're working on this project. So we're going to say npm install, and because it's a development dependency, we're going to say save dev instead of just save. And now I need to add, we're going to say let's see, Babel core. I know that's confusing because the B's over here, but it's Babel core, Babel loader, and they need to have a space between all these things. Webpack. We're going to say Babel preset env, and then Babel preset React. All right, that should be everything. So when we click enter, it's going to go ahead and install all those as our development dependencies. I'm going to pause the video because that's a lot. It's going to have to download a lot for that. All right, guys, the next thing we need to do now is go ahead and we need to add a new file to the React folder called, it's our Webpack config file. So we're going to say new item. It's a JavaScript file, so I'll just say webpack.config.js. All right, so inside of here, I'm going to paste this in, so just pause the video for a second, make sure you don't copy this yet, but in just a second, copy it. What we're doing here is we're actually setting up this configuration file that Webpack is going to use. And let's see. I actually don't need app at all. This should be fine. The entry point is going to be our app.js starting point. And then we want our output to be in this distributor. We'll keep the output like this. Let's go ahead and test this out real quick. Let's add a new app.js file to this because that's going to be the starting point. So that's the entry point that's looking for. Okay. So create our app.js file, and inside here we're just going to use some sort of new standard, some new syntax. This is a new feature of ES6. So if you want to write the latest JavaScript, then and you want to use keywords like constants or arrow functions and things like that, it's some of the latest some of the latest standards of the JavaScript language. It doesn't work in all the browsers, so that's why Babel is going to allow us to be able to write in the latest form of JavaScript, which includes classes and things like that. And it's going to compile it or process it down to older JavaScript that still works in the browser, but it does it for us. So we can still write modern JavaScript, but have it work in older browsers. And that's why we're actually setting up all these tools. But you'll see also that it's pretty imperative that you have these tools in place, because most of the tutorials and the documentation you're going to see on React these days, they're using classes and things like that, which means that you have to have Babel. And another thing too is when you're writing JSX code and all that stuff, it's impossible to do any of that stuff in just straight JavaScript. I mean, you'd have to be a ninja. So we're going to be using JSX, and you'll see what that is, and you know, as you get into React and everything. But the Babel makes all that possible. All right, so let's go back to our package.json file. What we need to do under the scripts, we need to actually tell it how to execute Webpack, because we didn't install Webpack globally. We want to go ahead and add it here. And this basically just tells npm, hey, I'm going to look inside my node modules folder from the same folder of where this config file is located. So it just automatically knows to look in node modules for the Webpack that we installed and not some global version. So that's why we're adding it to the scripts file here. And if everything goes well, we're going to see this thing try to compile. So now we're going to say npm run Webpack. And it did not. All right, let's see. All right, the reason why it's not working is our config file here. I'm sorry, I missed the module. I was just copying this from the web page, and we need to say module.exports. All right, that's it. You can see that Visual Studio was even trying to warn me of that it was complaining, because in order for this file to actually be usable by Webpack, it needs to be exported so it can import it. All right, let's go back here and try to do that. All right, so now you can see that it went ahead and compiled, and it put out the bundle.js. So if we go inside here, refresh, we're now going to have, damn, this is another reason why you don't add the node modules folder. Look at all the stuff that's now inside node modules. There's a ton. But now you have this dist folder, and we do want the dist involved in the project. So I'm going to say add or include in project. All right, so inside here, you can see this is a bundle file. This was created for us by Webpack. And now this was just Webpack that did it for us. And you can see that it's still using const. And const doesn't work in all the browsers. So we didn't actually use Babel yet. Babel's not being used by Webpack. So what we need to do now is add that portion to our web page. All right, so I'm going to be copying this as well, and after the output here, put a comma, and I'm going to paste this in. We're adding this module, and this actually tells it to use Babel, but we want to change a few things. Because we're not using Bower, I'm going to go ahead and remove that. And we do want it to say use Babel loader. Also, this needs to be Babel preset env, and if you remember earlier, we installed that, and we also installed React. So we need to say Babel preset React. And React uses a syntax called JSX, which is like this hybrid of HTML and JavaScript. And the thing is that it has to be compiled to regular JavaScript. So Babel can do that for you, but you need to have Babel preset React, and you need to tell Babel how to use that, and that's why we're actually setting that up here. So this is now going well, it should work, but let's go ahead and check this out here. I'm going to make sure there's no problems now when we run this with the config. All right, now one thing that you'll notice, it's actually annoying that we have to actually run this every time we want to build it, but we'll see in just a moment that we can do something that continually have it watch for any changes that we make. In fact, we'll even do that now. So after the modules, let's go ahead and say, we're going to say watch and then true. So now that we've done that, when we go ahead and we run Webpack, instead of just stopping, you can see it's now waiting. And if we look here, let's go ahead and make a change so that Webpack can pick up on it. All right, so watch on the left-hand side. So as we make a change here, now I'm going to Control S to save it, and you can see that Webpack picked up on it, and it recompiled, and it now has a new bundle file that it's created, and you can see that this is now added. Now another thing, you can tell that Babel is now working because it took out the constants keywords, and it's using the strict mode, which this is all older versions of JavaScript that still work in the browsers, and that's why Babel, you can see, is now compiling correctly for us. Now, to see React in example, let's go ahead and add something here. And I'm just going to type in React tutorial because this isn't specifically a React and tutorial setup, at least at this moment. So I want to use some of their getting started code to get our feet wet as well. Let's see. All right, this is what I was looking for on their documentation here. What we want to do is we want to copy this file here, or at least that portion, and we're going to go to our app.js and get rid of all that, and now we're going to save that. Now this is the JSX code that I was telling you about. The browser has no idea what the hell this is, and nor does JavaScript. The JavaScript engine can't compile this. But what it does is, with the React development extension for Babel, it's going to take this JSX code and turn it to regular JavaScript. Then it's going to compile the newer JavaScript to the older JavaScript. So it does all that magic for us on the fly. So if I go ahead and save it and you look inside the bundle file, now you can see that there's quite a bit more in here now than what we had before, because all this stuff, like it just went ahead and said, oh, you're using React and all this stuff. So, okay, now I need to bring in the React project. I need to bring in the React DOM project, and just a lot of stuff going on there. Now, this is an important part. Now, in order for React to actually be rendered, what we need to do is we need to say, okay, this document.getElementById root, we need to go ahead and take a note of that, because what we're going to do is add that ID to our web page so that React can bind this component to the root node. And it's best to just give a demonstration. So inside here, let's go ahead and create our div ID, and we're going to call this root. And that way React will, like I said, it will render all its code inside this element. Now, we also need to say, we need to add our bundle file to this index file here in order for React to actually work. So let's say we're going to say @ symbol and then section. And if you remember from our layout, our section for the footer was called scripts. So that's what we're going to be extending here. So we're going to say section scripts, just like that. And then inside here, this is where we're going to drag in our bundle. And you want to make sure it's in the scripts, because with this bundle, you want the DOM and all the elements and everything to load before this file actually loads. That's why we put it in just before the closing body tag. All right, so now let's go ahead and run the project. All right, and we have hello world. Now this is actually being rendered by React. So if I right click and dock this at the bottom here, you can see that the root now has this h1, the hello world that we added to it, and that is all inside this right here. So if we would have changed this to something else, we could do that. In fact, we'll see in future tutorials I'm going to do on React that there's quite a bit you can do here, but now React is now actually working. So this is a full example really of how you get ASP.NET along with React working. And once again, you guys should tune in to my React tutorial. I'm going to go into building quite a bit of stuff with React, but this whole initial setup is some of the biggest pain, I think, to getting involved in a lot of modern client-side development these days. The technology changes. I've done videos on this subject not even a year ago, and they're already out of date. So like things just go out of date so quick with some of this stuff. But the initial setup is generally the hardest part, and then from there you can really start looking at a lot of examples online, a lot of tutorials like mine, like books, things like that will really help you along. Because a lot of the syntax of React itself isn't changing, but the tools and everything that you use for your project do change quite a bit. Now, one thing I will suggest also when you're doing React development, there is a React Chrome extension. You definitely should check that out, this React Developer Tools. You absolutely need it. If you're going to use Redux, you have to use that tool as well. Like you're just going to pull your hair out with some of the debugging and things. Don't make your life any more difficult than it has to be when you're dealing with some of this stuff. Like this is going to make your life easier. Now, let's go ahead and see. I have to probably close this down. All right, so now if we right click and we inspect, we now have this React component, and you can see React tells you, oh, hey, I have one component, which is just a typical H1, and you can see it's children, the props and everything. I know it's kind of small, but this is going to help you a great deal, and you'll see when I start doing the React tutorial, if you follow along, that as your stuff gets more and more complicated, this is like an absolute must. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe for more of this stuff, and have a good day. Take care. Bye. Hey guys, what's up? So this video was brought to you by the Tech Academy, so make sure you guys check them out. The link is in the description tab below. From the courses list here, they have computer basics, overall software development, GitHub, HTML5, CSS, database, and there's a lot more courses, and they're adding courses all the time, so make sure you guys give them a look. Once again, the link is in the description tab below. Thanks guys, have a good day. Bye.